let's go to Oregon State now. And they had a great win over the weekend, the probably best game over the weekend. Not necessarily the biggest, but it was one of them, and it was the best. It came down to literally the final play. Who else would have run it in but Jack Colletto? Because that's what every Oregon State fan wanted to see. Fresno State didn't know it was coming. I did get a kick out of, I think it was Antonio Cromartie was doing the color commentary on the game, and when Colletto came in, he predicted that this is going to be a fake run and Coletto's going to throw. And then he runs over the right edge. And then 2 seconds later, Cromartie said, I can't believe they didn't know he was going to run to the right. Everyone knows it's going to run to the right. And I was like, dude, you just said it was going to be something else, which was not a half bad thought. But like, I just got a kick out of that. But regardless, Colletto just works. It does in certain moments. He's Taysom Hill of Oregon State's team, and people can rip on the Taysom Hill contract all they want, but you look at his stats on third and fourth and short. He's really, really good, and that's a really critical situation. So aside from that particular play where Colletto came up big for the Beavs, how did you feel Oregon State played on the road, winning at Fresno State for the first time in program history?
There's value in a player like Jack Colletto who, may not set the world on fire in one particular thing that he does, but when he's reliable in short yardage situations, you use him. And when he is a very solid backup linebacker, you use him. And when he is a special teams threat, you use him. And comes out and pulls off one of the biggest plays, I think, in recent Oregon State history with that game-winning touchdown. And I think Oregon State played about as well as I expected them to play. I think Fresno State got what I expected it to get against the Oregon State defense. The game followed the close matchup kind of prognostication that it received, not only from Vegas, but I think from pretty much everybody who picked the game. I thought it was going to come down the final possession. Sure enough, it did. But overall, I think just a big win for Oregon State. Not necessarily program defining, but to go and beat a very good team, a 10-win team last year, who I think is, probably going to be close to that again this year, on the road where you've never done it before, to do it in that fashion where Jonathan Smith says, no, we're not playing for the tie. We're here to win this game. And you do it. Not program defining, but a huge win for Oregon State, which is now 2-0 and looks like it is ready to make that leap and compete for. I don't know. We'll see if Pac-12 titles in the cards once it gets to conference play, but it's going to compete for 8 or 9 wins this year.
Yeah, and when you and I went through their schedule prior to the season, we both had them going 2-1 through these games, which I think would have been just fine. Like if you're Oregon State, assuming you don't stumble against Montana State at home this week, which I do not foresee in any way, shape, or form with how they're playing right now. If you'd been 2-1 going into conference play, I think Oregon State fans probably would have taken that, right? You would have felt good, whether it was beating Fresno and losing to Boise or beating Boise, losing to Fresno, like whatever, that was going to feel good. But now it's kind of that situation of you wanted your team to get to a certain level and they got above that level. And normally you thought, well, maybe we'll just be content that this happened and we got a little bit above it. But now that you see what's possible, I feel like in the minds of Oregon State fans, Carter, the expectations are now, yes, 7 wins is like the bare minimum. Whereas going into the year, 7 wins would have been, all right, that's okay. That's solid. Would have liked to see 8 or more. But now that you're probably going to be starting 3-0 with this win against Montana State, I think you got to look at this team as a Beaver fan and say, man, I expect 8 wins at least here.
You're exactly right. I mean, when I came on this show and I picked a 7-win season, I said, I think Oregon State's going 2-1 in non-conference. I think it has the potential to win all 3 games, but I can't predict it because Boise State and Fresno State were picked to win their divisions in the Mountain West. Oregon State flat out dominate the Broncos, I think, in week 1, and to go on the road in a hostile environment and win a game that was a toss-up and kind of a prove-it game, okay, are you really this good kind of game? I think the Beavers potentially at 3-0 to start the year, 7 wins would be a disappointment at that point. You look at some of the coin flippy type games later on down the season, and I think you have to give Oregon State, the edge in a lot of those if you were to go and predict win totals at this point in the season. And so I think 8 or 9 wins is probably the expectation in the fan base right now. I know a lot of fans were hoping for 8 or 9 before the year even began, but to start the season this way and to get 2 tough wins early on in the year, I think that sets things up pretty well for this team.
Yeah, I had them 8 wins coming into this season, and I feel really good about that prediction right now. And the other thing, if anyone listened to us at the time, then you missed out on it, unfortunately. But regardless of what specific number we were predicting for the Beavs going into the year, we were both taking the over of 5.5 easily, and that they're going to be at 3 through 3 weeks, and that's about as good as you could hope. Let's assume that happens, and let's assume USC mops the floor with Fresno State, which they probably will, because I don't know who's stopping that offense right now, and the answer is certainly not Fresno State at this point in time. That sets up a Week 4 showdown in Corvallis, top 10 USC, going on the road to play Oregon State. Where have I heard that story before?
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to go into the memory archives to think about it, but that game right now, Carter, and I don't think it's going to change because I believe it's been officially announced, is going to be on, checks notes, the Pac-12 Network, which is, number one, surprising because USC is the flagship brand in the Pac-12. Everybody knows that. I think of it a little bit like Gonzaga basketball in the WCC. They're the biggest team there. Every single game Gonzaga plays is on ESPN in some form or another, right? Whether it's in conference or out of conference, they're always on national TV because the WCC wants to get their biggest brand out there. The Pac 12 is not only going to be hiding USC next week, but they're also going to be shielding a lot of people from having to watch what could be a really good football game and a potential statement win for the Beavs if they pull the upset. I think Oregon State is getting absolutely screwed there.
The only reason that this game's on the Pac-12 network, I think, is because all of the Pac-12 teams are required to be on that channel 3 times this year. And ESPN and Fox are kind of betting on US in the latter half of the season, which makes sense, fair enough. But I don't think you can look at this game and say, well, this isn't a big game for USC. I mean, you're going to have probably a 3-0 Oregon State team that's going to be knocking on the door of the top 25. It'll probably check in, as the 4th highest vote getter that didn't make it.
They're already getting votes right now, as they should be.
Yeah, they're I want to say like 33rd right now or something like that if you extrapolate out, the vote tally. But no, it's a borderline top 25 matchup that features a top 10 USC game, and that has ESPN primetime written all over it. I mean, look this week. USC went on the road to Stanford, who I don't think anybody really expects to be like particularly great, and that got the 4:30 ABC time slot. And so I don't think you can look at this game and say, well, no, that's any worse than the matchup that they just featured, in the best time slot they have. I'm not saying Oregon State USC should be, like a prime time, nationally televised ABC, network TV type game. But there's no way it should be stuck at 6:30 on the Pac-12 network where nobody's going to see it. Because like you said, not only is it a big game for USC, but potential to be a really great game. The line of this game is probably going to be set somewhere in the 3 to 5 range, if I had to guess, based on the way the lines in the Pac-12 have been set this week. I don't think Vegas is going to particularly love the Trojans in this matchup going on the road against a good team. To just be a classic in what is probably USC's last trip to Corvallis, a place that it has struggled as a top 10 team in recent history, as you mentioned.
I would imagine the thinking for having Stanford USC in that primetime slot is, number one, it's USC, and it's the first Power 5 opponent for Lincoln Riley. And then the team on the other side is Stanford, and the Bay Area is a bigger TV market to tap into than Oregon State. Like, that's probably why, but I just saw that game, and I agree with you. I don't think it's necessarily because the Beavs may or may not even be in the top 25. if I had to vote, I'd probably give it to them if they were 3-0. But at this point in time, they might be just on the outside looking in. But regardless, I look at it and say, man, I think that's going to be a really, really good game. And it's USC. And look, maybe it shouldn't be because it's Oregon State on ABC in the primetime slot, but it feels like that should be an FS1 game. Like that's kind of what felt appropriate to me. And I saw that and thought, really? Like, I don't know if this is a holdover from Larry Scott's decisions or if this was made by this current administration and George Kliavkoff, but I'm with you that's kind of disappointing because if Oregon State pulls the upset, and think about it as well, if you're trying to sell a game to a particular network and say, yeah, you want to put this one on there, what does a network want to have for something like that? They want to have context, they want to have stakes, they want to have content to talk about beyond the game. You can roll the clips of Oregon State beating USC in Corvallis back in the day and frame that with the context of Jonathan Smith has been building this program up for the last 5 years, and it's been a steady, solid rise, and this could be the pinnacle win potentially. And we'll talk about this more next week, of course, but it just felt so Pac-12, like Oregon at Washington State. Yeah, I get it. It's Oregon and more people watch, but and that will also probably be a very good football game. But the ramifications of Oregon at Washington State to me are not as significant as USC Oregon State. And again, on USC's side, it's another chance to show against a Pac-12 opponent who looks to be a good team this year just how good the Trojans can be.
The storylines are there for sure. I mean, they can show the ESPN footage of Oregon State beating #1 USC in 2008, and the fans storming the field and whatnot. I mean, that game was worthy of an ESPN primetime slot. Now, given it was on a weeknight, so it's a little easier to fit it in there. But it's the precedent has been set that this is a matchup in the past that has been nationally televised. And I look at some of the other games that got national slots in that week. Of course, that's 2 weeks out at this point. But there's an FS1 game that matchup isn't Washington, Arizona, I don't think, but it's that caliber of game where it's like a middle of the road versus kind of a bottom dweller. And I'm like, are people going to be tuning in? Is that going to be on TV in
Yep.
bars at 7:30 p.m.? Like, I think people would rather watch Oregon State and USC, who are, well, I mean, at that point, I think we both expect them to be 3-0, so they're playing to stay undefeated. It's a game that, if both teams reach the expectations and the goals that they have, it probably has Pac-12 title implications. Whether it's this team is Oregon State has the tiebreaker over USC because it beat it head to head, that kind of thing. I mean, this is a big game in a lot of ways, and I just think that it's a shame, regardless of the requirements for teams to be on Pac-12 Network or for however many other games ESPN and Fox have to choose from. I think it's a shame that this thing gets relegated to the Pac-12 Network in a 6:30 p.m. time slot.
Yeah, you got to find a way to make it happen, but such is the life for us as Pac-12 fans. Carter Bain, senior editor and writer at beaverblitz.com. We will have him back on next week to talk about that game and more across our beloved Conference of Champions. Carter, good to talk to you, man.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate everyone listening. See you next time and have a wonderful rest of your day.